Kung Fu Panda 2 was released in 2011 and it takes place sometime after the first movie ended. Once again, this movie stars Jack Black as Po, and now that he's learned Kung Fu, he's now going to take into the second phase of training, which is learning to take in inner peace. While all this is going on though, there is this peacock named Lord Shen, who is really furious about this whole conflict that's been going on with his family throughout his life. And now, because of this conflict, he's basically rising up and he's got this great powerful weapon and he wants to take revenge. And what he's planning on doing is basically going to put an end to Kung Fu. So it's up to Po and the Furious Five to stop him. But wait a minute, considering Po basically works with the Furious Five now, doesn't that technically now make it the Furious Six? Now, I see why they didn't change it. It doesn't sound anywhere near as cool. One thing I really do appreciate about this movie is the character development, and a lot of people have been praising this movie for not being a rehash of the original. There are similar trends, like the fact that Po has to learn something really quickly as this villain is attacking. However, they're not making him extremely clumsy, not knowing anything about Kung Fu or anything like he did in the first movie. He knows Kung Fu and everything he learned in the first movie he remembers in this movie, but he's now going on a second level. He's now learning more, he's learning extra. But another thing I really appreciate about this character is how deep they go into this character. In the first movie, he was just this fun, likable, clumsy panda. However, in this movie, he actually has a lot of character to him because this movie is really about redemption and finding about who you are as a person and learning about your past. Because I can safely tell you that this movie is a lot more emotional than the first one. But I do like we go into a bit more detail about Po's backstory. It feels very well developed and it really adds to the character. It gives Po more dimension to him and it makes him even more likable than he was in the first movie. I also like that we slowly learned more and more about the past. Like, we catch some glimpses throughout the movie, and it isn't until one big emotional scene towards the end of the movie when we finally see the whole big picture. And when we finally do get to that moment, when Po finally learns the truth about what happened in his past as a childhood, it broke my heart. It's a really heart-wrenching scene, and I nearly cried at this scene. In fact, it was so heart-wrenching to me, it was even closer to making me cry than Inside Out. And I just watched the movie again last night because it's awesome, and I really didn't feel as emotional watching this movie again as much as I was watching Kung Fu Panda 2 again. Although maybe it's got something to do with the fact that this time watching it, I watched a commentary of the film instead of the actual film. But still, love this movie! So I think it is rather impressive to know that Kung Fu Panda 2 is actually closer to making me cry than this movie was, which is really mind-blowing considering Inside Out was and still is my favourite movie of all time. But at the same time, this movie doesn't feel like it's dragged or droopy or dull like a lot of other movies just for being dark and gritty. This movie is darker than the original, but it is more lighthearted at the same time because it continues to stray of being fun, entertaining, and humorous. This actually is a rather funny movie. And I was laughing in this movie just as frequently as I was in the first movie. There are some really great funny moments in this movie. Which is why I'm happy to say that it's really well balanced. A lot of other movies, including animated movies sometimes, are now becoming obsessed with being really dull, really dark, and really gritty, and really depressing actually, like a lot of the more recent Marvel superhero movies. But this time I feel like it's done right because it's well balanced. This movie is darker than the original, but it's also got a lot of great comedy. I wouldn't say it's funnier than the original, but I would say it's probably around on par. They're around as funny as each other. But it definitely does help balance the movie out. So it's well balanced. It's emotional, but it's also funny, so it's not overly dark and depressing. So this is still a fun movie to watch. And the characters are also developing as well as relationships. There's a really great scene between Po and Tigress where they start talking to each other sort of a bit about training and then on to Po's heritage. And it is a great scene. But one thing I find fantastic is that despite the fact that they are definitely sharing a friendship, there's great interaction between the two, and I really do like their relationship, but I like how their relationship just remains as a friendship instead of a literal relationship. I don't want them to fall in love, which I've been hearing a lot of people do. However, I am very strongly against them falling in love because for a couple of reasons. For starters, they're completely different species, so that alone will make it rather disturbing, and it's DreamWorks. And second thing is the fact, well, it's really, really cliche. And other animated films have been showing that you can make really good animated movies without having the main protagonist fall in love at the end. So the fact that other animated films have proven that you don't need this cliche to make a good animated film, I just feel like that it would be going against that, and I don't want the two to fall in love. But I definitely would like to see their friendship expand, because the scene on the boat between the two was a really great scene. I like the fact that they are bonding, and I do like the fact that they do have good chemistry, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how they do in the third movie, despite the fact that I heard that apparently the Furious 5 are really pushed to the sideline in the third movie. But I'm hoping that despite that, I'm still hoping that we're going to get some good chemistry between Tigress and Po as friends and only friends. I don't want to see them get together at the end. I even think the villain was a slight improvement over the first movie. I said I was rather slightly disappointed with Tai Lung. I thought Tai Lung was entertaining. I thought it was a fun, cool villain. However, the problem was that I was more supposed to be afraid of Tai Lung, because the way they set it up, he was supposed to be this really big, fierce, intimidating villain, and I never was afraid of the guy. And I'm not gonna say I was afraid of Shen, however, I definitely think he was more intimidating, and I feel like that I was able to take him a bit more seriously than Tai Lung. And I feel like that's because he wasn't overly built up to be this extremely threatening dark villain. He's darker and he's more threatening, but he's definitely a better villain from Tai Lung. As a proper villain, someone you should be afraid of and think, oh wow, this guy can kill me, I am glad to know that this guy is an improvement over Tai Lung, and I'm interested in seeing what they're going to do with J.K. Simmons as Kai in the third movie. One problem I do have with Shen, though, is that while I really do get his motivation, they have a lot of effort really building up his motivation. However, the thing I really don't get is exactly his goal. I never really get exactly what is he trying to do. I hear that maybe he's trying to end Kung Fu, but isn't that sort of like a sport? Is he trying to take over China? Or is he trying to just kill everyone who can do Kung Fu? Or just kill off pandas because he doesn't like pandas? Or I just don't exactly get what is he trying to do. I never understand his goal. Another problem I have is the backstory. I don't think the backstory itself is bad. However, I think it's pretty sad to know that he's got this very emotional backstory, and it's revealed to us within the first 2 minutes of the movie. Now, I think it would have been cool if we had some good action scenes throughout the first 2 acts and have this big conflict between Po, the Furious 5, and Lord Shen, and see how evil and really powerful he is and stuff. And then when we start to learn more about Po's backstory, then maybe at the same time, maybe then we can have all that information about Shen revealed to us. And I feel like that would give a really emotional impact, and we would go, okay, now we really not understand where this guy is coming from. And I feel like that would be a more emotional impact, as well as have a great angle to look in when you go to the movie for the second time. So I feel like that I think they showed the backstory of Lord Shen a bit too early in the film. But despite those flaws I have with Lord Shen, I will say that I think the climax in this movie is a lot more satisfying than the first one was. The first climax was fun, it was entertaining, but this one is flat out satisfying. By the end of the movie, you're like, yeah, that was awesome! Which leads to another thing, the action. One thing I love about the movie is that they took the action from the first movie and they cranked it up to 11. It's not violent, but it's still very cool. Like, they have a lot of really abstract and really crazy ideas. The action is one of the things I would say actually improves over the first movie. Now, one thing that's really commonly debated is that a lot of people seem to say that Kung Fu Panda 2 is better than the original. And I honestly find it hard to say whether or not I agree. On one hand, I think that this movie is a lot deeper and it's a lot more emotional, and I'm mind blown about the fact that I'm able to take the story about an anthropomorphic panda who wants to learn Kung Fu while stuck in a noodle shop and is voiced by Jack Black seriously. The fact that I'm able to take a premise like that seriously is a really crazy thing to accomplish. And I do compliment the film for being more emotional and deeper and almost making me cry. However, at the same time, I think that this first one is a bit more entertaining, it's a bit more fun. So that's why I'm going to have to say that I think they're kind of on equal regard right at the moment. I can't say one's better than the other. I'd say they're both around the same. They're both very entertaining films, and I recommend you check both out. Stay tuned for my review for Kung Fu Panda 3. I am hoping to see that in theaters. I'm hoping I will, and I'll review it as soon as I can. So, I hope I get to see it. But until then, hasta la vista, baby.